Middle East analyst. Tom, good to have you on the show. All right, let's talk about today's appeal, because we'll get to the other ones a little bit later on. Today's appeal is on the conditions for a prime minister to be deemed unfit or incapacitated and even removed from office. At the crux of this particular bill, as I just mentioned, is Netanyahu's legal armament. Essentially, one side of the argument is that the Knesset's legal advisors are defending the Israeli government and not the law.
Well, yes, I think look, all this stuff, today's hearing, which is presently ongoing right now, and it's being televised live, which is a new thing in Israel to televise Supreme Court hearings live, and all the protests you mentioned that have been going on pretty much since this government was formed right at the end of December and tried to start enacting a judicial reform process. You have to see the context to it is actually less about the tug of war over the judiciary and more about the tug of war about whether Benjamin Netanyahu, who is Israel's longest standing prime minister, should still be in office. His opponents are fed up with him. They say he's corrupt. They say he's been there too long. They say he's divisive. On the other hand, he's very good at winning elections, and he's won now, I think, 5 elections. He has been in and out of office since the late 1990s, so almost a quarter of a century. In that period, there were 5 other prime ministers. None of them managed to survive very long. Those 5 prime ministers from 5 different parties. That's how complicated Israeli democracy is. Ehud Barak, Labour Party, Ehud Olmert, Ariel Sharon, Naftali Bennett, Yair Lapid. And the fact is, he's an electoral wizard, keeps on winning. Now, the judicial reform is what his supporters argue is because the centre-left can't win elections and hold on to power very long, they are using the judiciary in a politicised way to try and push Netanyahu out of office. So he and his supporters say they are simply pushing back against what is very unreasonable limitations put on the executive. After all, it's the executive, the parliament, that is voted by the people, and Israel has elections almost every 1.5 to 2 years because governments keep on collapsing. So, the ultimate check and balance are the people. And if they don't like this Knesset, they will simply vote it out at the next election. And the judges are unelected and indeed kind of appoint themselves. It's not like America where they go before US senatorial hearings and so on. So Netanyahu and his supporters say they are the democratic ones. They have been elected. The judges represent a kind of liberal elite. Netanyahu's opponents say, no, democracy is not only about majority power. The judges are the ones protecting minority and other interests. And indeed, as you pointed out, Israel doesn't have a written constitution. It doesn't have a second chamber, like America has, House of Representatives and Senate, and Britain, where I'm from, has the House of Commons and House of Lords, although, by the way, Britain also doesn't have a constitution. So they say the judges are very important for the last and only check against executive power. Sorry if that's all a bit complicated, but Israeli politics.
You've explained it really well. All right, let's look ahead 5 weeks, because the big one will be happening on September the 12th. And for the first time in the country's history, the entire 15-judge Supreme Court bench will be coming together, convening to hear an appeal against a basic law amendment that curbs its own very powers. You called them, or you referred to them as someone calling them the quote-unquote liberal elite. I'm wondering, given the nature of this appeal, is the Supreme Court in a position to judge their future with impartiality?
Well, they might be in a position to judge it with impartiality. I don't want to suggest these very learned judges are not impartial. The problem is whether they are actually representing the liberal elite, or it's just a perception. There is certainly the perception that they're representing the liberal elite, and therefore it does not look good. They're in a way in a lose-lose situation. If they try and overrule the elected Knesset, the parliament, that's trying to push back against their, abrogation of power to themselves. There will be a big power struggle, but I think it's unwise of the Supreme Court to do that. I think the opposition should do something else. There were 7 opposition parties in the last government that was in office till last December, led by Naftali Bennett and then Lapid. Those 7 parties are still 7 different parties. They should unite as one party with a clear leader, a clear manifesto with an alternative, moderate version of judicial reform, and they should probably also have proposals to draft a written constitution that Israel doesn't have, and they should present that to the electorate. And, if I may point out, in the last American election, 2020, Bernie Sanders and all the other Democratic candidates stood aside for Biden. And because they rallied around Biden, the Democratic Party, including the progressives that didn't particularly like Biden, Biden beat Trump. The Democrats may not have beat Trump if Bernie Sanders and others had continued to fight till the last against Biden. So I think the opposition, the center and left-wing parties in Israel play into Netanyahu's hands and kind of almost guarantee that he keeps on winning elections. And instead of concentrating on this tug of war in the judiciary and these big street protests that we're seeing now almost every day, they need to organize electorally to make sure they win the next election, because otherwise, even if they push back against these judicial reform, there's no indication they'll necessarily win the next election. They will win the next election if they put up good policies and good leadership, and they unite to show a coherent set of values. That's my view, anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a good view you have. All right. Tom Gross, thank you very much for joining us here on the NewsHour. Do appreciate talking to you.